I discovered a sinister secret at a haunted animal shelter, the terrifying truth revealed. Sarah wiped the sweat from her brow, the mop dragging behind her like a ghost tethered to the floor. The flickering overhead lights of the animal shelter whispered a warning, casting shadows that danced along the walls. Just as she thought she was alone on this late summer evening, a low growl echoed from the depths of the dim hallway, sending a jolt of fear down her spine. What was happening? Was she imagining it? Her heart raced as she listened closely, the air thick with a foreboding presence. Biting her lip to suppress a whimper, she pressed on. Shadows loomed larger with each step she took towards the source of the eerie sound. Her instincts screamed at her to turn back, but curiosity clawed at her. As she approached a door marked with peeling paint, she hesitated, breath hitching in her throat. The growling intensified, a warning, a curse, or a premonition. She swallowed hard and pushed through, the door creaking ominously, revealing a nightmarish scene. Cages lined the walls, each one housing unnerving experiments and grotesque remnants of what had once been beloved pets. Scribbled notes on the ground detailed grotesque procedures, a chilling testament to the twisted mind of her once trusted supervisor. Panic surged in her, connecting her own struggles as a single mother to these horrifying discoveries. A community shelter had morphed into a place tinged with darkness, preying on the desperate. Just as the realization crashed over her, the lights flickered again and the door slammed shut, locking her in. Sarah's breath quickened, her mind racing. She spun on her heel, a wild determination ignited inside her. She had to escape, to find evidence that would expose the monster masquerading as a savior. The echoing footfalls behind her drew closer, the manager's taunting voice sending shivers down her spine. He reveled in his twisted dominance, unveiling a reality where good intentions had turned sinister. Animals are merely tools, he declared from the shadows, the venom in his voice cutting through her. You can't save them, Sarah. They are meant to serve a higher purpose. Desperation clawed at her as she darted through the labyrinth of horror. Time warped around her, and every corner she turned just led to more shadows, more secrets, missing pets, lost souls. All part of a dark tapestry woven into the town's fabric. Just as fear threatened to drown her, she spotted a glimmer of hope at the far end of the corridor. But before she could reach it, she froze. There, staring at her with wide, terrified eyes, was a cowed animal, its presence filled with a depth of sorrow that seemed to communicate the truth. Sarah's heart twisted, realizing these weren't just pets. These were lives trapped in limbo, their spirits intertwining with the legend of the shelter's dark past. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Adrenaline surged as the oppressive darkness wrapped around her like a suffocating blanket. The walls felt alive, closing in on her with each desperate breath. More footsteps echoed, relentless in pursuit. The line between predator and prey blurred with every heartbeat. She had to break free from this nightmare, not only for her but for all the souls trapped within these walls. As the lights faded once more, leaving her in a suffocating blackness, Sarah knew she had to fight for her life and those who couldn't escape. Would she fall victim to the terror lurking in the shadows? Or could she unveil the secret that could save them all? The echo of her heartbeat mingled with the growls, a haunting rhythm that persisted as she steadied herself for the approaching darkness. Would she emerge from the horror unscathed, or would it claim her as yet another lost soul? As the last flicker of light vanished, Sarah pressed her back against the cold, damp wall, the sound of her racing heart drowning out the growls that reverberated through the air. She felt every inch of her body tremble with fear, yet a fire sparked within her, a desperate need to escape this nightmare. Remembering the only way out was back through the doorway, she took a deep breath and stepped into the inky darkness. Each footfall echoed loud, deliberate, and betraying her fear. The growls morphed into guttural barks, their raspy edges sending chills racing down her spine. They were angry, agitated, demanding attention she couldn't afford to give. Suddenly, a crash resounded in the distance, breaking the fragile stillness. She flinched but pressed on. Perhaps her instincts could lead her to safety. The animals were restless. Cages rattled against their frames, as if the helpless creatures within knew a threat was drawing closer. "Why are you doing this?" she cried out into the darkness. Silence followed, thick and suffocating. Then, from the shadows, the manager's voice slithered around her. "You think you can escape, Sarah? They were never meant to be free." His laughter echoed, cruel and mocking. A deep dread pooled in her stomach as she felt the weight of his words. She refused to let him win. But where could she go? The shelter had become an extended labyrinth in which hope twisted into despair. She took a glance behind her just in time to see a pair of glowing eyes materialize in the corner, locking onto her. The growl intensified so near it felt like a knife pressed against her skin. With no time to spare, Sarah lunged forward, desperate to find another exit. She shoved against a nearby door, the rusty handle refusing her escape. Panic bubbled in her throat. She pounded against it, screaming. With one last push, the door creaked open, leading her into an even darker room. She hesitated but slipped inside, praying it would lead her away from the monster chasing her. This chamber smelled of decay, a sickening pungency that clung to her nostrils. Dim light seeped through cracks in the walls, revealing what lay within. It was more than she could bear. Shelves lined with jars filled with ominous substances, flesh and fur floating in murky liquids, stared back at her. Each object told a story of something that had once been alive and was now a mere specimen in this twisted laboratory. Her stomach churned, but she pressed deeper until she noticed a heavy metal door at the back. Hope flickered in her heart. That had to be the way out. As she reached for the handle, she felt a rush of icy breath on her neck. Not so fast. The manager's voice slithered around her again, sinister and close. Spinning around, she faced him, his eyes glinting with a predator's delight. "I won't let you ruin this. These animals, these souls are mine." In that moment, Sarah knew she was in a fight for more than just her life. She was fighting for the lives imprisoned within these walls, for those who could not scream or run. With a desperate cry, she lunged for the door, hoping against hope she could breach the confines of his dark reality. Just as her hand gripped the handle, the growling erupted in a frenzy, an avalanche of fury that crashed against her from all sides. Without warning, the door burst open, revealing a chaotic scene. Hundreds of eyes glinted in the shadows, the fur of countless animals trembling as they surged toward her. And then she realized the truth. With every shout of agony, every pained growl, they were calling for her help. Could she truly shut the door on this nightmare? Or was she destined to face the darkness together with the lost souls of the shelter, forever entwined in horror? As she bolted into the fray, the walls around her began to close in. As Sarah stumbled into the chaos, a cacophony of growls and howls erupted around her. The animals, wild with desperation, surged forward as if her sudden appearance had ignited their fury. The walls pulsated with the weight of their misery, each creature's eyes brimming with untold stories of suffering. She couldn't distinguish friend from foe. A massive dog lunged at her, teeth bared, but another animal, a small, scrappy terrier, stood in its path, barking defiantly. "Help us!" The thought ricocheted in her mind. Every creature was trapped, just like her. She had to find a way to free them. "Get back!" she shouted, waving her arms, her voice trembling. But the growl from the shadows was deafening. The furry tide surged, brushing against her like a tidal wave, each brush of fur against her skin a stark reminder of the terror surrounding her. Her instincts kicked in. Rushing toward the door she had spotted earlier, she maneuvered through the frenzy. The light barely illuminated the mass of bodies, an unsettling blend of shadows and growls. The floor was slick with what she could only imagine was decay, a horrifying scent that made her stomach churn. Then came the pounding of footsteps, heavy and deliberate. Behind her, the manager had re-emerged, madness gleaming in his eyes. "You shouldn't have done that," he barked, his voice slicing through the clamor like a knife. "They're not yours to save. They're mine." Sarah's heart raced. It was a madness she didn't understand, an obsession that twisted around reason. She pressed forward, pushing through the chaos, hoping desperateness alone could carry her through. "This ends tonight," she screamed, her voice fierce, bolstered by adrenaline. "Do you think you can stop me?" he sneered, stepping closer, his figure growing larger as he cut off her path. "These are just animals. They don't feel pain like you do." But Sarah knew that wasn't true. She felt their pain course through her veins, the bond of suffering deepening with every frightened howl. Pushing against the fear gripping her, she managed to swerve around him. "I won't let you do this." His laughter echoed again, fueling her rage. "You're out of your depth, girl. This place has a life of its own." Suddenly, a loud crash erupted behind her, tearing through the air. One of the cages had given way, spilling its terrified contents onto the floor. A frantic rush of dogs and cats poured out, eyes wide, fueled by primal instinct. Chaos erupted anew as animals surged forward towards the exit, a frenetic frenzy of limbs and fur erupting from every corner of the room. "No, no, stay," the manager shouted, leaping back as the mass of creatures pushed against him. He was losing control, his cruel facade cracking. Seizing her moment, Sarah charged toward the metal door, pulling it wide. A rush of icy air came bursting through, a promise of freedom beyond. But would they follow her? Would they risk the jaws of the nightmare behind them for an uncertainty ahead? She turned back, desperation alive in every fiber of her being. "This way. Hurry!" As the animals hesitated, uncertainty flickered in their eyes. The manager's voice roared, a guttural thunder, and her instinct to flee battled the desire to lead them to safety. "You can't save them. They'll turn on you." Everything hung in the balance. In a heartbeat, the first dog bolted. Others followed, a wavering hope igniting in each of their strides toward freedom. But even as joy surged within her, a chilling realization washed over Sarah. Would the door close before every creature could escape? And what would happen when the weight of her own choices caught up to her? The darkness swelled, a foreboding shadow creeping in. In the maelstrom of chaos, she felt the ground tremor beneath her feet. Would the walls of the shelter collapse before she could save them all? The surge of bodies, both human and animal, collided in a frantic whirl. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest as she whipped her head back toward the chaotic maelstrom. A myriad of eyes wide with fear flickered in the dim light, imploring her to lead them to safety. The chill creeping down her spine screamed that time was running out. "Come on," she urged again, her voice slicing through the barks and howls. Yet they hesitated, caught in the thick fog of anxiety. It echoed the very apprehension that tightened around her own throat. The manager's face twisted with fury, a stark contrast against the teeming storm of fur and desperate cries. Suddenly, from the corner of her eye, she saw movement. One of the large cats, bold and defiant, moving toward her as though sensing the light behind her. "Yes," Sarah whispered, her fingers tingling with hope. She turned back to the door, the air seeming to vibrate with potential freedom. In the split second that followed, it was as if time bent. The first dog darted through the doorway, followed quickly by the scrappy terrier. A wave of furry bodies began flooding forth, a stampede of clawed and padded feet rushing into the promise of the outside. Yet, just as hope surged anew, thunderous steps echoed behind them. The shelter manager was advancing, arms outstretched like an octopus of insanity, wanting to snatch them all back into his darkness. "Get back," he barked, fury spilling from his lips. Sarah turned, a visceral need spiraling within her. "You can't stop them, you lunatic," she yelled, urgency igniting every syllable. She felt it, the shift in the air, a strange amalgamation of dread and exhilaration. With each passing second, the atmosphere thickened, charged almost, a static pull towards the door. The sight of the manager, rage distorting his features, only fueled her resolve. Not today, but in an instant, The ground rattled violently beneath her feet, the tremor sending a shockwave through the room. It felt like the shelter itself was protesting, creaking under the weight of untold secrets and dark despair. Cages rattled ominously, some tipping dangerously near the edge where they stood. "We have to go now," she cried, pushing against the tide of animals, urging them onward. Yet just as her foot crossed the threshold, a jarring cry reverberated through the air. She turned back. A massive German shepherd, spooked by its surroundings, had lunged toward the manager, teeth bared. Time seemed to suspend as Sarah watched the chaos unfold, a snarling beast charging into a man consumed by his own madness. "Stop!" The manager's commanding shout slithered into the fray, but it was drowned out by the panic swirling around them. All at once, the room exploded in noise, a clamoring roar of growls, yelps, and shouts. The atmosphere thickened as the ferocity of the unleashed animals melded with the frantic energy of the shelter manager, spiraling into something raw and uncontainable. In a heartbeat, the manager stumbled back, losing his grip as the animals moved en masse. "No, you'll regret this." His voice pulled at the frayed edges of sanity, but it barely registered with Sarah. The first wave of animals surged past her, but not all were in sync. Others hesitated. Would they all escape? Would their past traumas hold them back once more? Panic clawed at her throat as the realities of the moment crystallized. Shadows danced ominously, and the growing dread echoed through her mind. Was this chaos merely the calm before an even more apocalyptic storm? As the last scrappy terrier slipped through the door, Sarah took one last look back, her heartbeat a thunderous drum. "Let us go," she screamed, the sound barely piercing the chaos around her. As the door slammed shut, the heavy thud reverberated indistinctly through the shelterless walls. Was it finally over? But then came the whispers, creeping through the cracks, voices unseen, a flicker of something darker thrumming beneath it all. As a sinking dread enveloped her, she wondered what it meant. What had she truly unleashed? What lay waiting in the shadows? A shiver slithered down her spine as she stood on the threshold of freedom, the weight of the past bearing down. Would this night ever end? Or had it only just begun? The air outside felt different, crisp yet heavy with anticipation. Sarah squared her shoulders as she blinked against the oppressive weight of the night. She hadn't the chance to catch her breath. The cacophony of sounds from the shelter echoed behind her, an unsettling harmony of snarls, defensiveness, and the unsettling silence of something left unanswered. "Where are we going?" One voice whimpered. A small beagle, trembling, pressed itself against Sarah's leg. She hesitated, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down hard. "We have to keep moving," she urged, glancing around. The street ahead lay shrouded in shadows, twisted shapes lurking in the dim light. Her heart raced as she took a few tentative steps forward. Then the others followed, scurrying like frightened shadows as they stumbled down the street. The sound of howls faded behind them, but the whispers from the shelter lingered echoing in her mind, a sinister reminder of what had been. Each bark and cry seemed to dance around her thoughts, twisting her sense of safety into something foreign, something dangerous. Was it worth it? The beagle asked, its tiny body quivering. "Of course, I think." But the truth wrestled in her gut. She had freed them, but what had she unleashed? The inevitability of their desperation clawed back at her, biting deep. And then there was the manager. She could still see his twisted face, etched with fury and fear. What lay behind his madness? They rounded a corner, and the streetlights bathed the area in a flickering glow. To her left, something moved, a dark figure. She sprinted ahead, the beagle and a few cats following close. "Sarah!" A frantic voice suddenly shouted from behind her. She whipped around to see a golden retriever stumbling, its golden fur matted with dirt, eyes wide with terror. It collapsed, body trembling, though it still tried valiantly to escape. "Come on," she yelled, reaching down to haul the retriever up. The weight of its fear coursed through her. Their wild escape was hardly over. Something chased them, unseen but undeniably present, and she could feel its breath on her neck. In a fleeting glance back toward the shelter, Shadows seemed to ripple and flicker, half-formed shapes wandering in the dark. A shiver danced down her spine. The low murmur of indecipherable words emerged, laced with malice. She turned sharply forward again, tears pricking her eyes as they pressed deeper into the night. She realized the way ahead was becoming less familiar. Stray cats darted past, creatures of the night and remnants of their unshackled souls. Each step felt heavier, dragging her down, deeper into the underbelly of what awaited them. "Where are we going?" The beagle whined again, its panting breath shaky. "Anywhere but here," she whispered. "We will find a safe place." But her voice sounded hollow, even to herself. Every instinct screamed for her to find refuge. Yet as the road twisted before them, Sarah was taken back to the shelterless darkness, the fading howls resonating in her mind. Had they really escaped, or had she inadvertently crossed into something darker? Suddenly, a horrific howl shattered the silence, slicing through her haze. It was a call that seemed to reverberate with an unsettling familiarity. Sarah's breath quickened. "Did you hear that?" she asked, feeling dread crawl through the air like ice. "What was it?" The retriever whimpered, huddling closer. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding louder than the howl. "I don't know," with every nerve flaring. She turned back one last time, and gasped. Dark shapes rippling from the shelter now moved closer, huddled figures stepping out of the shadows, their eyes glinting like broken mirrors. They weren't just animals. They were something else. Panic surged. "Run!" she screamed, but something deep within her whispered, "It's only just begun." What had she really set free? As they ran, Sarah glanced back just once more. The figures had materialized into ellipses of darkness, shifting like a nightmare spilling out of the confines of their world. She shook her head, trying to banish the phantoms of her imagination, but the instincts of survival warred with the fear that consumed her. The beagle panted heavily, its little body lagging behind. "Sarah, please!" The voice quivered. I can't keep going. Just a bit further." Her own voice betrayed the tremor in her heart. With each frantic breath, the weight of their escape pressed down harder. The street twisted into an alley, trash cans loomed like sentinels against the fading light, and the damp stench of refuse mixed with a bizarre, coppery taste that filled the air. Her throat tightened, fear clawing at the corners of her sanity. They had stepped into a realm where even the darkness felt alive, watching, waiting. "Sarah." The golden retriever struggled to keep up, its legs trembling beneath it. "What's chasing us?" "I don't know," she shouted, both panic and frustration curling in her gut. "Just keep moving. Find a place to hide." They made way into a small courtyard, suffocated by towering brick walls that seemed to close in. The only exit loomed behind them, a dim void darkness where shadows now gathered like predators ready to pounce. A sudden scream pierced the night, a horrifying wail that sent ice down her spine. But it wasn't just any voice. It sounded achingly familiar, echoing the cries from the shelter. "Can you hear that?" The retriever whimpered, pressing against her. "I can't think about it," she snapped, gripping the retriever's collar tightly. Desperation surged through her as she searched for cover. The courtyard was their fortress but also their prison. No other escape, just walls clawing up toward the sky, mocking them. Something shifted, a movement so slight yet so profound it sent a jolt of adrenaline shooting through her veins. Shadows dipped and swelled, breaking apart and coming back together like a mercurial fluid. Sarah's breath hitched as she felt the thrum of something primal in the air. It was fierce and hungry. The beagle barked, sharp and urgent. "What's out there?" She didn't have the answer. The howls from the shelter erupted anew, an anguished chorus that crescendoed around them. They were being surrounded, and the dread billowed in her chest until it was unbearable. "We need to go." She turned, ready to dart, when suddenly, a figure lunged out from the shadows. It was a monstrous apparition, neither fully animal nor human. A twisted amalgamation of what used to be. Glassy eyes blazed with a dreadful understanding, and mouths that were never intended for speech opened wide, revealing jagged teeth coated with remnants of who knows what. Sarah the beagle whimpered, realizing they couldn't run. Breathing heavily, She prepared to fend off the creature. She stepped back, but the darkness edged closer. There was nowhere left to go. A low growl emanated from the figure, wrapping itself around her, spiraling into a maddening echo that twisted her very sanity. It was a sound that held all the pain, despair, and wickedness of those who had screamed for help behind the shelter's walls. "My God," she whispered, feeling her heart hammer against her ribcage. But just as the creature lunged, a blinding light burst from the flickering street lamp overhead, illuminating the chaos for a fleeting moment. It was a break in the darkness, a chance to escape the nightmare for a heartbeat. "Now!" Sarah shouted, her instincts kicking in. With every ounce of will, she dashed toward the edge of the courtyard, adrenaline surging through her veins. The retriever and the beagle followed, hearts racing against the tide of terror. But behind them came the howl of fate, a twisted echo that screamed her name. Sarah closed her eyes, adrenaline coursing, and ran hard for salvation. But what if there was no escape? What if the darkness had other plans? The moment Sarah burst through the alleyway, the world around her felt like it twisted out of reality. A blind rush took her away from the courtyard, but she didn't know where she was headed. Streets blurred in the twilight, an endless cityscape decaying under a veil of dread. She could hear the footfalls behind her, echoing and multiplying, distorting into a dreadful cacophony. "Keep running," she shouted, praying her voice would guide her charges like a beacon. The golden retriever and the beagle flanked her, panting heavily, courage dwindling with every step. But she felt an urgency, a pull toward the unknown, deeper into the heart of terror in this forsaken neighborhood. A sharp turn landed them on a narrow street lined with crumbling homes. Graffiti scratched at peeling paint, blaring warnings and confessions none of them understood. Sarah felt a gut-wrenching chill. The shadows beneath the doorways seemed to flicker, shifting with anticipation. "Where do we go?" The retriever breathed, its fur bristling in the dim light. "Anywhere but there." Sarah gestured wildly behind her, where dark figures twisted in the distance, writhing like smoke through fingers clenching the air. She felt it, the creeping realization that they were not just garbled shadows. They were alive, beasts fashioned of sorrow. She spotted a disheveled building at the end of the street. A faint light flickered in a broken window, promising refuge. Forged by instinct, she sprinted toward it, heart pounding, breathless, filled with both hope and foreboding. "Sarah, wait!" the beagle yelped. There was a hesitation in its voice, a premonition that sent a tremor through her bones. But they had to take the chance. Entering the building felt like stepping into a different world. The air thickened with a pungent odor, a mix of old newspapers, dampness, and something metallic like blood. The flickering light grew steadier, casting strange shadows on the walls, lending life to the inanimate objects scattered throughout. There was a faint whimper from somewhere in the depths of the structure, drawing her further inside. "Do you hear that?" Sarah whispered, her instincts flaring like fireworks. She looked at her companions. They were nearly as frightened as she was. "Maybe it's another animal like us," the retriever suggested, its voice shaking. But Sarah wasn't convinced. She felt a weight bearing down on her shoulders, the vibrating hum of something sinister edging closer. "We should suddenly." The door slammed shut behind them. Panic shot through the room, and shadows danced wildly as they turned. The beagle whimpered low, eyes glistening with dread. An echoing sigh reverberated around them, thick, oppressive, undeniably human. "You shouldn't have come here." A figure emerged from the darkness, a gaunt silhouette cloaked in rags that hung off its bony frame like a forgotten tragedy. Its eyes glimmered with a hunger that sent icy shards into Sarah's heart, the reflection of something twisted and warped by despair. "What do you want?" Sarah demanded, forcing her voice to stay strong. The figure stepped closer, a grin crawling across its face like a creeping disease. "This is where we keep the lost, the forsaken, just like you." The realization struck her, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. The horrors from the shelter flooded back, the screams, the sickening sounds of despair echoing as they were led away to an uncertain fate. Before she could respond, the walls trembled, revealing crude murals painted in dark, dripping colors, images of those who had come before her. They all wanted to escape, but there is no escape. Sarah's heart raced. She grabbed the retriever's collar, knowing the truth was dawning like an ominous storm. We have to go. Now. But as she turned back to the door, it disintegrated into shadows, leaving just the vacuous darkness closing in around them. The air thickened, alive and constricting, locking them in. What if there's no salvation? Whispered the beagle, its voice a pitiful echo of fear. And in that haunted sanctuary, Sarah felt a cold tremor of understanding. Sometimes, the darkest places have no way out, and the greatest horrors await those who wish to turn back. With shadows swirling around like a living nightmare, she faced the figure, resolved. Then we'll fight. But as she raised her fists, the weight of darkness bore down, and a chilling voice echoed through her mind. But what you don't know is there's a worse fate than death. Sarah's breath caught. What was she about to face? And what secrets awaited her in this hellish trap? The silence around them was suffocating. Sarah felt the weight of despair clinging to the air, warm and thick like a fog rolling in from the sea. The figure swayed slightly, the rags fluttering faintly as if breathing in unison with the darkness surrounding them. You think you can fight? This place toughens you, breaks you, chews you up and spits you out, or worse, never lets you go. With her heart pounding in a chaotic rhythm, Sarah attempted to steady her breathing. She could feel the retriever pressing against her leg, its warmth a welcome contrast to the chill creeping through her veins. The beagle's low whimper sank into her gut like a stone, echoing the doubt gnawing at her mind. What have you done to all of them? She demanded, pushing back against the rising tide of terror. It felt futile, but she couldn't let them sense her fear. She had to hold the fragile thread of courage. They came here for safety, thinking they'd find sanity in the chaos. The figure leaned closer, eyes narrowing like slits in a wolf's face. They left their dignity at the door. You're here now, hurled into the cycle, driven by your own desperation. Sarah's skin prickled. The words wrapped around her like barbed wire. It was true, she had fled, driven by the anxious thought of enemy shadows behind her. But she couldn't dwell on it now. Each breath tasted like metallic dread. Run? The cynicism in the figure's voice dripped like acid. You think running will save you? It only brings you closer to the truth. The truth is what you fear, yet it's your only path. Before she could retort, the shadows shifted again, an uprising of dark forms snaking toward her. Panic flared, and she stepped back, dragging her dog with her, a swirl of fur and humanity tangled in unyielding dread. Fight, or embrace your fate. Choose wisely, the figure taunted, gesturing grandly, as if hosting a grotesque game show where life and death could be won or lost in an instant. Sarah gritted her teeth, glancing at her companions. We're not lost yet. We can find a way out. The determination shone in her words, but her voice trembled like a candle flickering against a storm. A distant howl sliced through the air, echoing the anguish of the many who had come before her. It resonated deep inside, wrapping cold fingers around her heart. It was a warning, a plea, but she couldn't let that seep into her resolve. The walls squealed as if protesting her idea of escape, and Sarah felt the pulse of the building quicken. She took one bold step forward, forcing herself to look the figure directly in its chilling gaze. We'll find it. Whatever it is, we're getting out. Oh, there's a way. The figure's smile widened to an unnatural degree. But oh, sweet child, you'll have to show us who you really are. The shadows pulsed, a dark tide rising as translucent faces flickered in and out of sight, their mouths moving in silent screams. The retriever growled, its bravery like a match lighting a fire, pushing against the dark swirl. Follow me. A voice whispered from the darkness to her right. A figure like a shadow wavered, beckoning with an outstretched arm. No, Sarah shouted, pulling back as her instincts flared. Don't listen to, but it was too late. The momentary hesitation allowed the figure to slip deeper into the blackness, and tendrils of dread surged forward to engulf them in a suffocating grip. Find the truth or become the darkness. The gaunt figure mocked as the world around them shifted violently. All change is born from pain. The whisper clung to her mind like a shroud, sending a chill through her spine. With a desperate push, Sarah turned back to the retreating shadows, her resolve awakening amid despair. She would not succumb. "We'll find the truth," she heard herself declare again. But her mind screamed, "What if the truth is worse than the darkness?" And just like that, the room began to collapse around them, spiraling into a vortex of flickering images, faces of the forsaken, echoes of tortured cries. The walls constricted, cementing her in, forcing a choice she never wanted to make. With no clear path in sight and panic clawing at her throat, she clenched her fists tight, taking one last stand against the consuming dark. "Together," she shouted as shadows leapt forward, seeking to claim them. As the engulfing darkness surrounded them, an ominous answer echoed in the depths of her consciousness. But sometimes, together just means a greater danger, what was lurking that they could not see. What presence awaited to claim them in the depths of this nightmarish threshold? The air shattered with a deafening roar as the darkness closed in. Sarah felt it wrap around her, an all-consuming fog that clawed at her face and pressed down on her chest like a weight too heavy to bear. She stumbled backward, dragging her dog, the beagle's frantic barks merging with the sounds of anguish swirling around them, creating an orchestra of horror. "Now, child, embrace your fate," the figure's voice boomed, reverberating in the void. It loomed closer, the hollow eyes boring into Sarah's frantic gaze, and she could almost see her own reflection in that desolate darkness. With a fierce cry, Sarah shoved the beagle behind her. "Stay back," she yelled, summoning whatever strength remained. In this chaos, adrenaline surged, licking at the edges of her fear like a flickering flame. The walls undulated, seemingly alive, and grotesque faces pressed against the surfaces, mouths moving in silent screams, pleading for release. Nausea swept over her, thick and bitter. She could taste despair on the edges of her tongue, and it made her want to weep. "Here lies the truth sewn into the fabric of the shadows," the figure mocked, tilting its head as if amused. "You believe you can resist? Every step you take drags you deeper into what you wish to forget." "Shut up," she spat. Each word felt like a lifeline, yanking her back from the brink of panic. "I'm not here for your games." But even as she spoke, the shadows thickened, pressing closer with every syllable. They were whispering secrets, teasing at memories Sarah struggled to suppress. Images flashed before her, fragments of a life once held precious, now twisted and broken. Laughter turned to cries, love to loss. The beagle whimpered, sensing her distress. She knelt, eyes locked on the dog's brown gaze. "We'll find a way," Sarah murmured, though her voice trembled with doubt. The shadows seemed to pause, swirling almost inquisitively. Then another voice, soft and sweet, broke through the terror, a melody tainted by sorrow. "Sarah, come play with us." Her heart dropped. Not again. The face of a child flickered in and out of view, small, with tousled hair and a smile that turned sinister in the blink of an eye. She recognized the child all too well. It was a shard of her past, one she had tried so hard to forget. "No," she shouted, clenching her fists. "You're not real. You're just a trick." "Oh, but I am real," the childish voice echoed, each word laced with charm and malice. "And you brought me here just like all the others." In that moment, the shadows lunged, enveloping her in their dark embrace as she recoiled in horror, yearning to flee. Yet, there was nowhere to run. The world twisted grotesquely, and she fell, tumbling into an abyss of torment. Her heart raced, pounding against her chest like a caged animal. Thoughts clamored in her mind, drowning each other out. "No more games. I'll do whatever it takes." Silence enveloped her, thick and choking. But within it pulsed a distant glimmer, a flicker of hope mingled with despair. "Find the door," the whisper echoed softly. "Find the door, but how? Which door?" As she groped in the thick darkness, the pressure grew unbearable, wrapping around her throat like a noose. Sarah gasped, praying her voice would reach any ears that might hear. "Is there anyone there?" The dark responded with cruel laughter, reverberating around her. Faces formed and vanished in the void, eyes gleaming with malevolence. Someone is always watching. The voice coiled around her like a serpent, cold and possessive. You want to leave? You need to sacrifice. Sacrifice what? She screamed, the panic rising like bile. What do you want from me? Nobody leaves empty-handed. It hissed, a snake's lust for blood lurking beneath the surface. Then, in that moment of stark clarity amid the chaos, an understanding gelled like ice forming around her heart. The choice loomed before her, the bitter truth she hadn't expected. To save herself, she might yet have to lose everything she held dear. What am I willing to lose? Sarah whispered, and the shadows surged around her, hungry for her answer. As the darkness closed in tighter, a creeping sense of inevitability hung in the air. Would she dare to uncover the truth, or succumb to the darkness waiting at the edges of her vision? The shadows shivered, and the ominous laughter erupted again. Decide quickly, child, the clock is ticking. What awaited Sarah as she faced her reckoning? Would she uncover the heart of the darkness, or would it claim her? The answers were just lurking out of reach like the edges of a nightmare. In the suffocating dark, Sarah felt the pressure of choices weighing on her soul. The shadows pulsed, dancing greedily around her, hungry for her fear. She clenched her fists tighter, adrenaline coursing through her veins. I'll find the door, she vowed, her heart hammering with newfound resolve. I won't let you win. The laughter surrounding her grew louder, mocking her defiance. Defiance? It's merely a reflex. The voice oozed disdain, slithering around her. But Sarah had come too far to cower now. She took a deep breath, her thoughts racing. There has to be a way through this. It struck her suddenly, the whispers of the lost, the desperate echoes from the shelter. Perhaps they were not just memories. Perhaps they were guides. With every animal she had released and every life touched, she was being shown the way. She could be their voice, their strength. All right, she shouted, addressing the encroaching shadows. I refuse to sacrifice anything. The words felt like a sudden zap of light in the oppressive darkness. Foolish girl. Choices require sacrifice. Are you truly ready to leave them behind? The figure hissed, and shadows encircled her like a vice. I will not let them remain in suffering. I am stronger than that. She felt warmth rising from her core, fueled by the memory of each creature she defreed, magnifying her courage to a roaring flame. The shadows hesitated, flickering as if they could sense her resolve. Anger surged in her heart. You're wrong. Their spirits will not be trapped here. I will set them all free. As the shadows recoiled, Sarah caught sight of a flickering light in the distance. It beckoned to her a door. No, the figure screamed, its voice filled with rage. You cannot escape that easily. But Sarah's heart thudded with newfound urgency. She sprinted toward the light, her pulse of fierce percussion in her ears. The shift in the air surged with promises of freedom and salvation. Behind her, she felt the shadows lurch forward, desperate to claim her back into their fold. With a desperate lunge, she flung herself toward the door. The surface shimmered like liquid gold, radiant against the encroaching dark. The tendrils of shadow screeched as they scrambled toward her, clawing for the last morsel of her essence. Let go, she screamed, throwing her weight against the door and bursting through, spilling into a world cleansed by light. She collapsed to her knees as dawn broke, sunlight pouring down like a heavenly balm. The chaos blurred and faded, the shadows retreating as if burnt by the sun's glow. The beagle and retriever stumbled through next, panting but unharmed. They were safe. Did we make it? The beagle whimpered, eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. Sarah nodded, a wave of emotion crashing over her. Yes, we did. We're free. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the sweet, fresh air of dawn. The world outside the nightmare she had just left was real and alive. But as she looked around, relief entwined with lingering dread. The shelter loomed in the distance, a dark looming presence against the soft azure sky. What will happen to those we left behind? She muttered, clutching the retriever's collar tightly. A realization washed over her while they had escaped. The fight wasn't over. The shelter was still a pit of shadowy whispers and hauntings. For everyone we freed, we must let their truth be known, she declared fiercely. This was her new mission. As adrenaline ebbed, she vowed to expose the horrors, to honor the spirits of those they had rescued. We will tell their stories, she whispered fervently. Together, the animals gathered close, and with renewed purpose, they pressed on, ready to confront the world. The sun peeked through the remnants of that dark night, bathing everything in a warm glow. This was their new beginning. Onward, she urged, and they set off, setting forth a chain of connection that would ripple through the community. With every step, hope surged amid her heart's fierce beats. They would remind everyone of the lives sacrificed in darkness, turning that pain into power. And as shadows faded behind them, she felt the echoes of those she had saved intertwining with her spirit. They were free not entirely, but they would fight for freedom together. Now was not the end, it was the dawn of something beautiful. But there was a lingering question gnawing at the edges of her mind. What had she truly set free? And would they face the repercussions of their choice? Only time would tell, and as they ran towards the horizon, she vowed to ensure their stories would never be forgotten. So as you finish this tale, reflect on what you've just read. You need to subscribe now, so you don't miss the next chilling chapter that unfolds. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm, showing your support for more epic stories. Flood the comments section with your thoughts and theories about what awaits our heroes. And don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this unfolding nightmare. Your voice matters. Join our journey as the next chapter is just around the corner.